And we're live. Welcome everybody to the Developer DAO workshop. Also introduction to Moving on Aptos writing competition. For those that don't know, it started yesterday and it is ongoing. These workshops are here to help you understand what Aptos is, how to get started with it. We have Brian from Aptos is going to show us a very good intro, like how to just get started in Aptos. If you're not a native Move user like myself, we're going to learn how to just get something deployed and get using Aptos and like understanding the way it works. Brian, nice to meet you. Go ahead and do like a quick intro.
Sounds good. Thank you for thank you for having me. I'm Brian. I'm a software engineer at Aptos Labs. My role is full stack, so I spend a lot of time, or not a lot of. I spend a little bit of time in pretty much all over the stack, from the Move smart contracts to like dealing with the backends that talk to these smart contracts, the indexers, and then even like the front end that has to interact with these smart contracts. And previously, I had done a lot of Solidity. I had even done some Solana development. So I've had a little bit of experience all over the place in crypto.
Nice. So, I mean, just to get us started on here, like those that are coming in from a non-Move native right here, what would you say would be like the most comparable? Like if I'm a JavaScript developer, TypeScript, I think the front end kind of like plays that part in there, so you can easily migrate your front end to an Aptos front end. It's the smart contracts that requires a little bit of adjustment, right?
Yeah. So a lot of the tooling is going to look very familiar. So you're probably still going to be building your front ends in React, TypeScript, or just like whatever. But I would say React, TypeScript, JavaScript are the most common across crypto. You're gonna still have wallet adapters. You're still gonna have wallets that inject into Window that you can access to sign transactions and have the RPCs. And full nodes are just like decentralized API servers that you can send transactions to. You can view, like you have like the view or read contract functions that you can call. And I'd say like the main thing that feels like a bit better tooling on Aptos is I think the indexer tooling is a bit more prominent. Whereas like I think a lot of protocols are using stuff like the graph or doing something like very custom with Bigtable. But I think the indexer support on Aptos feels really strong and enables a lot of better like dApps that can be built around it.
Nice. Yeah, it was exciting when we were doing the Twitter spaces and kind of learning the differences of it and like the advantages of it. It was pretty exciting on there. So I did take a quick peek into like the Aptos developer docs, and it's actually pretty solid. Like it usually I never know what I'm getting into on there, but like getting started, like you basically start off with like a full stack that like, you know, end to end type of thing, doing the smart contract, front end, and then you kind of just deploy it all. So really, really smooth. So very excited to see what you're going to show us today to get started. Again, this is going to be around the focus of either getting started as a developer or the technical writing docs, as we has the writers workshops happening right now. Let us know.
Yeah, sounds good. So I guess I can share my screen, and the goal of what I want to do as a workshop today is build some familiarity with Move and the tooling around it. And I think once like you have some of these basics set up, you can definitely start relying more on like the docs to like get further or on better templates, because I'm going to use the most basic template today, but a lot of it mostly for educational purposes.
Got it. Yeah, definitely. Like as someone that's not native to Move, it's always been interesting to me. It's just a matter of finding time. So like, it's a great. I'm going to be learning with you right on the spot as we go.
Nice. And
Yes.
I expect some questions at the end too, because
Oh,
I'm sure I'm
I'll
not
stop
going to
you in
be
the
able to
middle
cover.
on there. I will
Yeah.
definitely stop you in the middle. For those, I just noticed a quick comment. It's not working on the official link on YouTube. We are on Twitter live right now. I'm going to have people working on to see why it's not happening, but it looks like it's now alive on YouTube. So apologies for that. I think they fixed it on the back end, but sorry to disrupt you, but we will get this up and running. Okay, so I have your screen ready to go. As soon as you share it or get your screen ready, I'll share it to the screen.
Okay.
There we go. Let me add it to stage, and we're looking good.
Nice. All right. So I have a terminal opened up here. I'm gonna hope that most people watching here are like not uncomfortable using a terminal. And what I want to do is just like explain some prereqs. So I already have installed on my machine Node.js and the Aptos CLI. Let's see. So if you want to make sure that your machine has these things, you can just do node version. And so this is the version of node I have installed on my machine. I can also do Aptos version, which I have here. Node, I would recommend using NVM or installing just like from their website and following their instructions. Aptos, if you're on a MacBook, you're probably going to want to use Homebrew, because we stopped supporting like just the binary with Aptos because of the way OpenSSL ships with Aptos. So you will probably have to use Brew. And then if you're on Linux, you can actually just download the binary release off the Aptos core GitHub page. Actually, I can just show that really quick here. So if you ever wanted to just literally grab the binary, if you come to this repo, which is public, you can come into releases, and then you want to look for these Aptos CLI releases, and this is the latest one, and you can just download these binaries and put them in your bin. So here, but I would make sure that that you have Node and Aptos installed. And the next thing I'm going to do is use the Create Aptos Dapp tool. And I'm going to use it mainly to go over Move stuff, but I do want to say before I do that you can actually use this tool to build your entire full stack Dapp. And I actually encourage you to try to use it and give feedback, because it does give you a lot out of the box. But yeah, here, I'm just going to use it now. And so the command would be npx create aptos dapp, and this should work as soon as you have Node installed on your machine.
What version of Node do you suggest? I see that you have 22. Is that the version that you should be using with this latest library?
I actually don't think there's a like strong requirement to use 22. I would actually just use whatever is in LTS. And if you run into issues, you should probably report them, because I don't think that Create Aptos Dapp is meant to be pinned to like the latest version. I think it makes sense for like any LTS version to be supported right now.
For those that don't know, I know NVM was mentioned, but that's such a powerful tool of switching node versions on there. I just got like pilled on that last year. So like I'm jumping between node versions left and right. So NVM, if you don't know about it, learn it for sure. It's useful tool. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay, so here, I actually have it on my machine, but I think a later version came out, so I'm going to update it. And here we get a wizard that lets us set up our Dapp. So here I'm going to call it intro to move. I'm just going to do 4 because I actually probably already have an intro to move here. And so this is the folder that everything's going to be set up in. And you're going to get 3 templates. I'm just going to use the boilerplate one because it's the most like from scratch. But if you're trying to build something and you plan to have like a coin or an NFT, I would actually I think this, NFT and then coin or token. I would start from these as good examples. But for today, I'm just going to do this. And then you're going to get 3 options for your network: mainnet, testnet, devnet. And this is actually worth talking about a little bit, because mainnet, I think, should make sense. It's the main network and the funds are real, relatively. Testnet and devnet both have faucets. So the funds on there should not have any value. And on testnet, it is a long-standing deployment. So what that means is it's pretty much what you'd expect out of any test network. DevNet is actually could surprise you because it gets wiped every single week. And so if you're working on something and you deploy your smart contract onto DevNet, don't be surprised if a week later it's not on the network anymore, because it gets wiped every week. And it's really good to kind of like test things that you're not sure about on DevNet, because you can just redeploy like a new version that's not like backwards compatible on DevNet. But testnet, you're kind of stuck with the things you've already deployed. And if you have backward incompatible changes, you're going to have to pick a different address to deploy things to. Just for simplicity, I'm just going to do testnet. And then I don't want to make any changes. And so what this is going to do is it's going to create this folder intro to move in my current working directory. It's going to install all the node dependencies, and I think it's mostly just node dependencies. So this is going to take a while. I'm just going to cancel it for now because I already have a directory set up.
Okay. For those, while you transition over, for those that have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat. In the middle, I'll post it up, and then when we get a little break, Brian will take care of it on there. But go on, carry on.
Okay. Actually, I don't mind. Like, have there been any questions? I can answer some before I move on from the terminal part to the code aspect.
Nothing yet. So far, so good. I'm loving the CLI options of being able to get started. I'm a very big proponent of fork and go, right? I don't want to read docs. I want to just start playing with it. So right now I'm loving it.
Awesome. Yes. And hopefully this will also be really fun too, because it should be very iterative. So what you're going to get once you set up from create Aptos Dapp with the boilerplate is you're going to get a front end directory. This is going to be a React app. You're going to get a move directory that contains all your move source code. Node modules is just node modules, public scripts, and then a bunch of like, what do you call these? I guess config files. We don't have to worry about this. Yeah. We're more interested in the move stuff today. Build, I would actually normally ignore this actually. So just do that right now for our sanity.
But while you're doing that, the question was, what's the best IDE for Move?
Okay, I am actually not using the best IDE for Move. I would recommend using IntelliJ or one of the things from JetBrains, because the plugin for Move that works with Aptos actually works. The plugins for Move on VS Code are not like, they don't like work really well, and the main reason for that is because it's kind of like trying to support Sui Move and Aptos Move at the same time, and then you have to like configure some specific features that are specific to Aptos, and you're not going to get like really good like highlighting, and you're going to get like weird random warnings and errors. So I would recommend JetBrains. I personally use Cursor right now. This is just like a personal choice because I find that the AI helper on Cursor is just insanely powerful, and I just take the hit on terrible compile messages, or like syntax highlighting or whatever, for better like AI suggestions. So that's just the trade-off that I've made here.
I know we're kind of going a little off topic on this next question, and as you're multitasking, but I'm pretty sure you hear this a lot of times. But what's the main difference, one-liner, between Sui Move and Aptos Move? Aptos Move.
Okay. I would say like okay, so I will caveat with like, I haven't actually written a line of Sui code, so I can't really like give a really accurate representation of the difference. But my impression from reading the docs is Sui's model of programming looks a lot like Solana's, where you're declaring like all the things you're going to interact, all the state you're going to interact with on every transaction. Whereas Aptos, you are declaring the type of state that you're going to interact with, but it feels a lot more like Solidity, where you just have regular functions, and you're not dealing with like this idea of like accounts and objects quite as much. And I think there's like a few other like small syntax things that are different, but yeah, I think like Sui really has an emphasis on what they call like an object model. So I think if you were going to investigate the difference, I would start there.
Got it. And then as you're multitasking right now, since it's based on Rust, would Rust over JetBrains also work as well?
Based on Rust. So which part are you referencing is based on Rust?
That would be the question. I'm going to wait for Nadev to answer that. If not, we can keep moving, and then we'll come back to that question. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So build is kind of like actually just artifacts. So this is like all the like bytecode that gets generated. You're not going to probably have this at first, so I'll just delete this for now. But what's important is sources, which is the move source code, and this move.toml, which describes my my project. So it has a name, it has a version. Implicitly, there's also something called like backwards compatibility in Aptos Move. So let's see if I can. Okay. Yeah. So one thing that's actually going to be different that if you're coming from like the EVM world is that upgrading is kind of like a first class support. So if you're coming from EVM world, oftentimes if you want to upgrade a smart contract, you're using like OpenZeppelin's proxy and changing the implementation contract. And then you have this idea of a logic contract and then like a contract that stores all the state. In Aptos, it's literally just republish your package and you get backwards compatibility checking out of the box. Like you can't deploy a smart contract that's not backwards compatible. And I personally think this is a really good feature because like it's kind of horrible to have to think about like your logic contract. Oh, is like the way I structured my state variable is going to be like overwriting storage somewhere. Like I think it's just like not very developer friendly. But upgrading here is so much more painless. And if you're building any kind of like app in the wild, I think you're pretty much going to be guaranteed that your current app is not feature complete. So yeah, I think that's a huge advantage. So the default, yeah.
Sorry to cut you off, but I think that's like a really good thing for people that are writing in the writers competition to highlight that of the ability to upgrade. So just to make sure that I have this correct is like we're keeping the same contract address, but we can change the logic on there by upgrading. Like, so could I, make a token and deploy it and then add functionality to it in that same contract?
That's a yes and no.
Got
it. And okay, I'll just answer it now because like my demo is actually quite short, so I don't mind like dealing with these things as they come up. So yes, you can change the implementation of things in your upgrade. However, for things like coin in the example you're giving, coin is actually a standard. And it's different from EVM world where you have interface. So ERC20 is an interface that every single ERC20 has to implement. It has to have a transfer function, it has to show your balance, it has to show total supply, name, symbol, etc. And you can implement those interfaces however you want. So it's extremely flexible in Solidity, but it can also be kind of like you could end up with some booby traps actually, because you could have one coin that transfers exactly as you'd expect. Bob transfers 10 coins to Alice. Bob loses 10 coins, Alice gains 10 coins. But you could also write an ERC20 that's perfectly valid for Bob to try to send 10 coins, but only 5 of them ever show up with Alice, and then 5 of them get burned. And so you end up with these like smart contracts that can be doing like really wild things that, even though they conform to the interface, the implementations can be all over. The difference in Move is that with these standards like coins, NFTs, you can actually expect not only the interface to be the same for every single coin, but that their implementations are all the same as well. Because what the way coin works or NFTs work in Move is there's one smart contract in the framework for it, and then you're deploying coins off of that same contract, and or NFTs off of that same contract. So you lose some flexibility, but what you gain is like really strong standardization.
Nice. I think I asked the right question then because we got really deep into the details.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Okay, but kind of coming back to like where we got like lost in the rabbit hole is with these publishing upgrades. So the default is that contracts are backwards compatible, but it's actually possible to specify an upgrade policy that's immutable. So these are the two options that you have. If a contract is specified as immutable, then you're not going to be able to deploy a upgrade. But this can be really good because then the users are guaranteed that there's never going to be like, I guess what we call in crypto world, a rug, right? Because you're guaranteed that this implementation is going to be here forever. And for compatible, I can talk about this briefly too. It only allows compatible upgrades. So you can change implementations of functions, but you cannot change their function signatures, any public function signatures. And the reason for that is because if another smart contract is talking to your smart contract, you don't want to break that link by introducing a breaking interface to that function. And the other thing that you can't change is your state. So we'll see later how state is defined. Actually, I'll just show it here. We define state here as structs, and what it means to be compatible is you cannot modify structs. You can only introduce new structs to your smart contract, but you cannot extend a deployed contract with another field.
Can we make that font a little bit bigger for the people watching on their cell phones?
Yeah. Is this better?
One more control or command plus. Yes, there we go. We have to get geriatric sometimes on the streams.
Yeah. It's okay. Yeah. I'm on an Air though, so I'm not gonna split my screen anymore then.
Yeah, no worries.
So we're just gonna do single pane.
Okay.
All right. So I've talked a bunch. Let's actually look a bit at some Move code. So this smart contract, I want to like kind of set the context of what we're trying to do here. So this smart contract I've already written out, and we're just going to go over, is for an application where a user can come and sign up, and they sign up with a name, and then we track points for this user. And the only like security consideration here is that only the user should be able to change their name and change their points. So if Alice signs up, we don't want to let Eve be able to modify Alice's name on the app, nor be able to modify her points on the app. So that's the general thing of what we're trying to build. It's pretty impractical in real life, but it's, I think, a pretty good learning exercise.
Yeah.
So here I've defined my module. This is kind of like a package. So it's module address, but honestly, it can be called anything. Let's just call it like DevDAO workshop. And
Would
then
this
the only
be,
I'm gonna have to, yeah, sorry.
Would this be equivalent to a contract name? for EVM folks?
It's close. It's close. So there's like an idea of name spacing. And these are actually like aliases for the address. So like, for instance, my dev address for dev.workshop workshop is 0x123. And this means that my contract is going to be deployed to 0x123. But the difference in Solidity is that I can actually deploy multiple of these to the same address. So I can write another one called module2.move, and then I can call this module 2, and then 2 smart contracts are going to be deployed to the same address. But to reference a function, it's going to be, this is an address because we reference it here. So in locally, this is 0x123. This is the name of the module, and then I can call the function. So this here would be dev DAO workshop, my module 2, init account. So this is how you would fully qualify this function.
Got it.
And this is actually, when you call it from the front end, it's actually going to look more like this. We don't actually own 0x123. It's going to be like something much longer, but locally speaking, it's 0x123.
So you could predetermine your contract address as long as it's not taken, theoretically.
And you need to have the private key for it as well.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to delete this, but I think that was not a terrible sidetrack. But yes, so here, my namespace, my package is dev.DAO workshop, and this is kind of an alias as an address. And then my actual contract name is my module. So you can't have duplicates of the same name under the same address. And then lines 3 through 5, I am establishing my imports. And I'm going to go back to move.toml because this file here actually is where I define my dependencies. So here, my Aptos framework dependency comes from the GitHub, and I specify the commit or the tag. So I'm using the mainnet tag, and then you can specify a subdirectory. So we can actually look at this really briefly. So if we come here, the subdirectory is Aptos Move framework and then Aptos framework. So then here we see sources again. So this is actually like an important folder name. And then you see all these Move files that we can import. And these are pretty much like your main tools for, or like basically your standard library. So pretty much every single Aptos contract is going to import from here. And it gives you a lot of like really helpful things from like some standards like coin, but this is actually deprecated. I would not actually recommend using this one. There's events, there's fungible assets, and then you even get some data structures. I don't know if like vectors in this one, but let's see. I think there's a standard lib, Aptos standard lib, and here you also get stuff like, I'm gonna just do it here, and then we'll find out where it is. Okay, it's in move standard lib sources framework, move standard lib. Okay, it's somewhere here, but yeah, there's also a vector here that you can use.
So if you use the CLI tool, does this automatically come into the framework as your boilerplate template, or do you have to modify? Okay, cool.
Yes, so you don't have to think about this, but that way you're not like wondering where did my imports magically come from. It's not magical. You're actually specifying it here.
Yeah. For smart contract or like developers with EVM, if you use Foundry, it's pretty similar on there. You know, hard hat users may have a little bit more difficult time on there, but if you're used to the Foundry TOML file, it's I would say 80-90% similar on there. So sweet.
Nice.
Yeah.
Oh, I will add a small detail here. I do recommend using the revision mainnet. And the reason is that default, you'll probably end up using is main, but main is actually like the development branch. So you could end up with publishing or compile or like usually actually publishing errors because something is in development, but it's not on mainnet yet. And you might sometimes run into publishing errors if you're using something that's ahead of what's actually on mainnet. So mainnet ends up being like a pretty good and pretty safe revision to use. If you know what you're doing and you need like a special feature that might only be on testnet, I think there's also a testnet tag that you can use as well. All right, so going back, we have our imports. We're using events. We are importing this address of function that we'll go over later. And then we're also importing string. String is not totally native in Move. The underlying representation is a vector of U8s. String is kind of like a nice abstraction on top of a vector of U8s. And so these are imports. And the next two things I'm going to go over is state and defining it and functions. And so this is kind of, I would say state is the biggest difference compared to Solidity that you'll have to get used to. But I think the concept, once you get used to it, feels a lot more natural for smart contract development than the one in Solidity does. So we're going to define a struct here. It's going to be an account, and it has a property called key. And the way you can imagine key is that it means that this struct can be stored in your wallet. So if I have 0x Brian, that's not really a real address, but if I have 0x Brian and I call a init account, I can move an account into my wallet. And so if you look at my wallet, you can see this account with a name in it and a points in it. And this is kind of different from the Solidity world. And the equivalent in the Solidity world is mapping, where you're mapping an address to a resource like name. So like you map an address to a name, an address to the number of points that they have. And it's kind of a weird concept in Solidity, actually, if you really stop to think about it, because it's the smart contract storing all the data. But in Move, your wallet has that data in it already. And so if I want to look up my account, I look at my wallet. I don't look at the smart contract. And so maybe an analogy for this is an actual wallet versus the bank's ledger. So if I want to know how much money I have, I just look inside my wallet. But in Solidity, I have to go to the bank and ask, how much money does Brian have? And the bank would tell me. So hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah. So in a technical standpoint, it's way fewer RPC calls to see like what your entire holdings are or any analyzation on your wallet, right? Because if I was doing like a portfolio project, like DBank, so I have to check every token balance on there and some kind of like API infrastructure to make all these calls to make sure they're updated. But on Aptos, I'm going to get that right one day. Aptos, I should be able just to ping the wallet and then it'll give me all the data right there. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So that's actually an extremely good way to paint it because, yeah, like if you think about like MetaMask, right? They ask you to import a coin. Right. So that way you can see that coin. It's because they can't index every single coin that you might have a balance on. Versus here, it's just iterate over all the resources the account has. So there's going to be a few global functions that let us interact with structs with the key capability. Exists is a function that passes in an address, and it gives us a Boolean about whether this struct exists in our account or not. Borrow global grabs a read-only version of the struct from my account, and it'll error out if it doesn't exist. And then borrow global mute is the same thing, but it gives you a mutable version of that struct that lets us access the account. And having these two separated is actually quite powerful because it informs a function about whether this function is going to edit a resource. And so if a function never calls borrow global mute, you know that that resource will not change if you call that function, which can be really powerful in the context of something like parallelization, because you know that that resource is not going to change if you read it or call that function. So my account here is very simple. It has a name field that's a string type, and it has a points field that's a points type. And so let's talk about what points is. Points is another struct that I define with a count that's an unsigned 64-bit integer. And this one does not have a key capability. So we cannot store points in a wallet, but it has the store capability. And that means that I can store a point struct inside another struct. So it lets me nest. And normally you probably never want to do this. This is really just an exercise. You should really just be doing this or this. But I wanted to do this nesting at least, so that way you can know that you have this available to you if you want to nest structs among each other. And then here I define some events. I think this is something that should be familiar to a lot of smart contract developers. You define a struct for these events. They have to have drop and store. You never actually store these yourself, and they need to be dropped because they're not stored, or they may not necessarily be stored when you create them. And if you're not as familiar with events, the way I would describe why you need events is that smart contracts are really good at telling you what the current state of things are. So what is Brian's balance? What is Bob's balance? It's really good at those questions. But smart contracts are actually quite bad at historical questions. So things like, what was Brian's balance in the last transaction? What was it a year ago? What was it? How has it changed from transaction to transaction? The smart contract has a pretty tough time telling you the answer to those things. And even if you try to track it in a vector, it's really expensive because these are really just like append only things that you're logging. So events help you make historical queries. So with points changed, I can answer questions like, how have my points changed over the last year? What were my points last year? So that's why you should consider having events whenever you're doing mutations. So I have points changed here, which logs the address of the user whose points changed and their new points value. I also have name changed, which logs whenever a new name is set on that user's address. Okay, so let's get into, so we've defined all our state now. Now we're going to define how our state transitions when somebody calls these functions.
Real quick question on the events. So it's not built into anything specific on there, maybe other than maybe tokens or NFTs, like for transfers. So you have to like basically state all your events for every activity, have it, and then you can pull it off from like an indexer or something on Aptos, right?
Yep.
Got
Yep. That's right. So yeah, you get them for free in some instances, but pretty much for like anything where you're building your own application logic, you should be pretty intentional about what you want to track. So here we have public entry functions. So function visibility by default is private. So this is a private function if I just do this. Actually, let me go through each of the keywords. So this makes it explicitly public, but this kind of public means that I can't call this if I sign a transaction, but another smart contract can call this. So having just a public fund is public in the smart contract context. If you have public entry fund, this is the most open. So it means that other smart contracts can call this function, And users that sign transactions can also call this function. And that's what we want. We want a user to be able to sign on their Petra wallet to initialize their account. And this function takes two arguments. It takes a signer and it takes a name. And I want to talk a bit about this signer type because I think this is also why I like Move a lot. Signer type is kind of like a wallet. So it's like 0x Brian, but it's more powerful than just an address. When a signer is here, I know that in the body of my function, this signer has actually, this variable is somebody's address that has signed the transaction. And this is really powerful because if I pass this signer to another smart contract call, it preserves the fact that I'm in another function, but I know that this user signed the original transaction. And you don't really get this concept in Solidity because if you're passing addresses around, you get message sender at first, but then you lose message sender as soon as you call another smart contract because the smart contract that's calling becomes the new message sender. So that's why you have stuff like approve and then transfer in Solidity. Whereas if you use signer here, a smart contract can use that signer to then change your funds and move funds around. So whenever you're swapping on, for example, Thala or like Hippo Swap or Liquid Swap, you don't have to approve before you swap, which I think provides for a really good user experience.
Gotcha.
So this move to the first argument has to be a signer. So you can only move things into your wallet if you sign that transaction. So that's also how you prevent some spam. You can't have this, nobody else can put an account in your wallet. Only you can if you call this transaction. So it moves into, for example, my wallet name, which I get to pass in. So here I would pass in Brian as my name, and then it initializes points to 0. And then increase points is another public entry function, which again requires the user as the signer. And this is the authorization that ensures that Eve or anybody else cannot change the points on my account. Only I can sign transactions that increase my points. And the amount I want to increase it by, and the resource I have to acquire in order to do that. So first, I convert my user address, my user signer into an address. And then I check, does an account already exist in my address? And account exists is very simple. It's just this exists global function with the type that I want to check. And if it does not exist, we throw an error. Then afterwards, we know it exists. So we call borrow global mute. We want the account type that we're borrowing, and we pass in the address. So then now we have an account struct, and then now we want to compute new points, which is my current account's points plus the amount I want to increase it by. And then I set accounts.points.count to new points, and then I emit an event for the change. So here you have simple addition, you have assignment, and we're going over these global functions like borrow global mute exists, and then also the idea that signers need to be converted into addresses sometimes. So signers can be converted into addresses, but you can pretty much never convert an address into a signer because you're not guaranteed then that whoever is calling this actually signed the transaction. So signer is quite special. So the one other thing I would add is different from Solidity is, well, compared to older Solidity, this will error out if it overflows. So you don't need to worry about overflow errors, catching them. You just get it by default.
Got it.
Decrease points is the same. It's just subtracting now instead of adding. Set name is also pretty simple. It's just changing my name to the new name I'm passing in. And then now I'm defining some view functions. And so view functions let us check on the Explorer, which is kind of like the Aptos Etherscan, to see details about state. So this returns a Boolean about whether my account exists. This returns the points on an address. This returns the name on an address. And now I have a unit test. So my unit test here, we mock an admin with 0x12345 address. We check that the account does not exist at first because we never called initialize. So this should be not false, which is true. And then we initialize the account, passing the admin as the signer, and we give them the name John. And so we check that points should initialize to 0. Their initial name should be John. Then we increase points by 10. Their points should now change to 10. We decrease their points by 5, and so now their new point should be 5. And we check that if we set the name to Jane, that the name of the admin is changed to Jane. So now what I'm going to do is compile this code. So I'm going to use the Aptos CLI to do this. And to do that, I'm going to call Aptos move compile. And I need to specify a package directory because basically you need to specify the directory that has a move.toml file in it. Our current working directory does not have a move.toml file. It's in the move directory. So package dir is going to be move. And we don't have an address set for module address yet. And we want to use this dev address. So the final flag to add here is dev. So here it's going to compile the code. We have a error. Let's figure out what's going on here. Dev.DAO workshop is not assigned a value. Try assigning it when calling the compiler. Oh, we need to change this to dev.DAO workshop.
Live coding at its best, you know.
Right. But now if you encounter the error, it's gonna you'll know. So 0x123 is this 0x123 here. You can actually see a change if we do something like this. It should change to 0x1234. Nice. So these are dev addresses, and you can see that this is the dev.DAO workshop is just an alias for the address. Right. So we compile it, and now if we want to run a unit test, we just, instead of saying compile, we just say test. And we can see that, I hope, all our tests pass. So everything that we implemented here works exactly as we expect.
Nice. I like it. I mean, as someone's first time looking at Aptos Move, it was pretty straightforward. I get like my Solidity mind is still comprehending certain things, but it makes sense. Like as you're flowing through it, it really makes sense. It really makes it like really intuitive to like just how it flows. If anybody has any questions in the audience, sometimes maybe their brain is kind of like absorbing it too. But if anybody has any questions, feel free to ask on there.
Yeah, that sounds good. Actually, I haven't done this before yet, so this can be quite live. Yeah. But if we have some time, do you want me to publish this and we can try looking at it on the Explorer?
That's perfect. Yeah, let's do it. Like any more that we can get out there is good.
All right.
One question as you're doing this is, what's the acquire again in the function?
That's a great question. So why don't we do this actually? So I'll explain why we need acquires. Or when we need acquires. So anytime you're calling borrow global or borrow global mute, which is basically a way of saying, if I need to access this resource for a read or write purpose, then I need to declare in the function signature that I'm going to access this type. And I am not super familiar with the intricacies of our VM just yet because I spend a lot more time doing application development. But my intuition here is that this helps inform the VM that this is the state that's going to be touched. So if one function acquires account and another function acquires coin, I know that their states are never going to intersect with each other. And so it is safe to run these two functions at the same time. But let's just see what happens if we don't have this acquires. And just off the bat, what I expect to happen is that we're going to get a compilation error because it sees a borrow global mute without an acquires. So let's try this compile. It tells us this call acquires account, but the acquires list does not contain this type. So that's why we need to include this extra account acquires here, and we will compile now. So it's a compile time check on the resources that we access.
Nice.
Any other questions?
I'm waiting. If as we're waiting for questions, I'm going to go ahead and put this form. We are going to email it out, but for those that are watching, we do have a feedback form that I want to do this before I forget. I'm going to post it to the chat. Any feedback we can get would be great. It's always beneficial for us for the workshops and everything with it. You've been great, Ryan. Like, I think personally, like, probably one of the best dev relations instructionals overall, especially with a new subject that's on there. It's been really, really good. Aptos is lucky to have you on this for sure, because I've had some rough workshops. So it's been
Nice.
awesome. Yeah.
It definitely helps that like I think like I have a rough understanding of what's going on in the other ecosystems and
Yeah.
like how it kind of translates, because it really doesn't fully translate, but I think a lot of the stuff does actually make a lot of sense when you see how it's done in Move.
Yeah. Yeah. Just for a reminder for people that are coming in late that didn't miss intro, Develop DAO and Aptos are partnering to have a writers competition on there. It's moving on Aptos. I'm gonna paste that Luma here. It'll also be part of the Luma, part of the emails that are coming out. But it started yesterday. This is one workshop of two. The next one's going to be happening on Thursday as well. So in 2 days, basically the same time that this one's starting, but on Thursday, to help all the technical writers that are writing on there. We have a pretty decent bounty on there. First place is going to get like $500 each plus $3,000 in funding a writers program with Aptos. And then second and third and 10 runners up as well. So there's a lot of opportunities for those that want to write about Aptos. It's pretty open. Could be about the details about this workshop or something that else you want to highlight that you're reading onto. We still have that second workshop to discover a little bit more about it, but just throwing it out there for those that are interested for the writers workshop. And then I'm looking at the things. So, any questions? So for a non-dev transitioning to learn Move, that's front end heavy. I'm going to put my opinion, and I'm going to let you put that in, Brian. Is you don't have to touch the smart contract at all. You can have somebody else do it. Like, that's what we call front end devs, right? They're in the EVM space. There's plenty of front end devs that are familiar with smart contracts but never really touch it. They just get an ABI or whatever they need, and they can focus more on the front end and user experience, right? So, like, I think sometimes the front end guys get a little bit more love than the back end guys, because we just make sure it works. But I think you can start an Aptos right away with just your front end skills. What do you think, Brian?
I think it's a lot similar to the way front end works in other ecosystems. Yeah, I think front end devs actually get a ton of love in crypto because like your back end is just the smart contracts now. And once they're deployed, they're up as long as the Aptos network is up. So it's very similar. And actually, I think it might be worthwhile to take you through publishing a module, so that way we can just see what's going on, like in let's see what's going on and how you can like maybe like talk to your smart contracts from your front end. I won't go into all the details, but I think it's worth at least seeing it on the Explorer.
As you're
So
doing that, I'm going to say native. Yeah, the details are in the Luma page, but it is an article with certain minimums that wants to highlight certain things on Aptos, like educational in a sense. Like if there was something in this workshop that you want to deep dive into or highlight a little bit more, the best IDE stack, or what makes Aptos different from all the other EVMs and Move it VMs. So anything that kind of like sparks your idea to your community. There are requirements, like it's not going to be like in a Google sheet. You have to put it on a published platform like Mirror or something like that. But yeah, the details are in there, but it's pretty open to what sparks your idea or sparks your passion. So curious to see how people approach it.
If you don't mind, I'll just try to publish real quick.
Yeah, let's do it. I
All
love
right.
this stuff. So I'm with it.
So here we have Aptos. We want to create an account that we can use to deploy things. So that's what this apto init command does. It's going to ask us what network we want to initialize with. I'm just going to choose testnet, and I'm going to let it generate a private key. And it also automatically funds it for me because I selected testnet. So it sets up an account here, 0x7BAF, and I'm actually going to change this address to 0x7BAF now. And next, what I'm going to do is Aptos move publish package. Actually, let's just repeat what we have here. Publish, and we're going to get rid of this dev because we want to use this actual address now. So we publish it. I really hope this works. Okay, we have a transaction to submit now on chain. So I'm going to say, yes, I want to submit this transaction. And now it's actually submitted. So we can check now on the Explorer account. And we want to make sure this is on testnet. Sometimes it's not, but we're lucky here it is on testnet. And we published our code on here. So when we come to modules, you'll see my module on here with everything that we went over today. And let's actually use this really quickly. I'm gonna set up my wallet here. This is testnet. I'm not actually this rich. I wish. But here I'm gonna initialize an account. Signer, I don't need to specify because when I sign the transaction, I am the signer. So here I'm gonna call myself Brian. Actually, let's just call it DevDAO. I don't want to dox myself on the internet yet. And I'm gonna run this, and I'm gonna sign that transaction and approve it. And now I've signed this transaction. Let's actually also duplicate this tab and take a look at what's on my address. So here, let's look at resources. And so under resources, we should expect to see this thing that we just made. I'm just going to Command F for account. So yeah, 0x7BAF, my module account. It has a dev DAO in it, and it has 0 points. So this is what it looks like. It's literally stored in my wallet. And then now let's try increasing our points by 5. Let's see what happens. So let's approve that transaction. And then here, oh my gosh, it's like WebSockets or something.
Nice.
Yeah, I have 5 points here now. So yeah, this is the demo I wanted to show. And I think also here there's an ABI. There's, I think, also an API that will give you this ABI, but this is the ABI that you can use potentially like a type generation tool. I don't know if I can like say I love or I'm a favorite of any specific tool, but Thala Labs has this type generation tool called Surf, and it's a lot like, I think, like VM in Solidity, where you provide an ABI and it generates like a bunch of types for you that you can use to interact with your smart contracts that are type safe.
Nice. That's cool. So when you deploy your contract, it's pretty much auto verified. You don't have to do like any verification for the Explorer or anything like that.
That's actually a great question. I'm not sure if we're like verifying bytecode. And like if you use the CLI tool and you're not modding it, like it's just always going to work the way you expect it to. But I'm actually not sure if we're doing bytecode verification. So that might actually be something worth investigating for me or for the team to get a good answer on that. But basically what the tool is doing is by default, it deploys your bytecode and it also uploads your actual smart contract source.
Nice. That's cool. I like that.
I actually probably am short on time. I can probably at most give 3 more minutes here, but happy to answer any more questions.
Last call for questions. Now's not the time to be shy. But if people do have more questions, what's the best place to reach the Aptos team or reach you?
Yeah. So the Discord is quite good. I think there's always at least one DevRel keeping their eye on there. There's also a GitHub for community questions. Let me try to share Aptos developer discussions. I think this one is quite active as well. Let me just post this in
Yeah,
my.
I'll push it over as you send it to me.
Okay, I
Perfect.
put it in our private chat, but yeah, you can
Yes.
push this one out.
Yeah.
Um, so uh, Discord there, and if you have any like actual technical issues that you think is a bug, you can always submit an issue. But I think Discord is probably the fastest to get you a reply.
Got it. Got it. Excellent. Excellent. It doesn't look like we have any more questions. Thank you so much, Ryan. That was really good, really in depth. I mean, I couldn't, I don't have any other questions. It's pretty straightforward. If you have anything, give Aptos a follow, check up the GitHub discussions. Look forward to seeing the writers workshop. Again, we are going to have another workshop in basically less than 48 hours, same time that we started today, but on Thursday. There'll be more reminders. There will be an email sent out as well. Make sure to fill out that feedback form. Every piece of information helps us get better. Thank you again so much, Brian. Catch you
Yes,
guys in the
thank you
next
for
one.
having me. You've been an awesome host. Yeah, hope you guys all learned something.
Cool. And that's it.